Hello everyone, today we have a new review of Cronos The New Dawn. I was able to play it a few days earlier before its launch day. Shout out to the Bloober Team for giving me a free code. Even before I was able to actually stream it, I just had no idea that they sent the code immediately, and I had no idea because my emails filtered it out, that certain email. But eventually, yes, I did find it the next day. So shout out to Bloober Team. They're very kind in giving me a chance to check out their game and showcase it to the channel, as I am very familiar with survival horrors. I mean, one of my top videos right now is Dead Space, and I love the Dead Space remake. Dead Space remake was actually my first Dead Space game. I also platinumed and beat Impossible mode on my PS5, so again, I'm well versed in the survival horror scenes. I also did that for the Resident Evil 4 remake. I just love my survival horrors, alright? So, Cronos The New Dawn, we talked about it last month. I covered it on the channel, and I gave my first little thoughts and impressions, my initial opinions of how the game looked. I didn't seem as confident about the game, even though there was a lot of big traits of what I liked from the demos that they showcased. First of all, what really appealed to me from those demos, it was the gunplay, the sound design, and the whole environment. And you could really tell that it was very inspired by the Silent Hill 2 remake and how they designed like the whole horror factor and even the level design, because playing through Cronos The New Dawn, I see a lot of somewhat reused assets from the Silent Hill 2 remake, which is not a big issue at all. I mean, reusing assets is completely normal. I definitely see, like, at its core, like their main design philosophy kind of comes from the Silent Hill 2 remake, and yeah, it does have that eerie creep factor to it. As much as I do like a lot of certain things from that game, I just was unsure because it didn't really do anything new on what they showcased. It just felt like another Bloober Team game that they just had to put out a game for this year. But again, looks may be deceiving, because fortunately enough, this game, when I first played it, it was very impressive. I didn't know it was heavily story driven, very detailed with their level design along with their gameplay mechanics. Again, the sound design is always carrying them as usual. It's amazing. And then the gunplay, and because in the Silent Hill 2 remake, when I was playing that, when I know James Sunderland is not known to combat a lot of enemies and always use his pistol, but the gunplay looked and felt amazing in the Silent Hill 2 remake. I think that was, like, honestly one of my favorite things about the Silent Hill 2 remake, is how they actually designed the combat in a way. Even though it had its problems, it was a bit stiff, but here in this game, it just feels like a much more polished version of the Silent Hill 2 remake, and plus they added much more combat in this game. At the same time, it still feels like a true survival horror. When you come into this game, don't think that you're going to be playing like a RE4 or RE5 or even a RE6. There's really none of that in here. A lot of it, yes, your weapons are your tools, but they put a lot of emphasis on resource management and even inventory management, the traits that you would expect in a survival horror. And I feel like, I will talk about this later, I feel like honestly they lean more towards the hardcore community when it comes to survival horror, just because of how punishing it can be for a newcomer, or even if you're like a old timer like me, you could say. I'm just kidding, I'm not as old, but they could still punish you, because I was always trying to experiment with certain weapons and use certain resources, and the game does not give that leeway for you to experiment these sort of things. You always have to be careful, so I'm always being cautious when it comes to it. But anyway, before I branch off to gameplay, I do want to talk about the story. The game starts off very simple. You pretty much land into Poland as the quote-unquote the traveler. You're the traveler in the gameplay, and the traveler is pretty badass, honestly. I think the way that they shot and portrayed the traveler has been amazing. It's really given, honestly, Big Daddy vibes from BioShock, along with Loki being that silent protagonist that kind of just mumbles to herself. So I've been personally enjoying that. I'm not quite sure who the Traveler is, as I have not completed the whole entire game just yet, and I know I'm making a review, and I hate making these type of reviews, but my schedule is a little bit packed because I don't know what's going to happen for next week on what I will cover, because Borderlands 4 may be out, but I've played enough where I feel like I get the gist of the overall gameplay loop, because I've already put in almost 10 hours, or maybe over 10 hours already, of the game. The story, when it opens up, it's pretty simple to understand at surface level, because the main thing that you have to know is that, yes, you're in Poland, and you're trying to uncover a lot of the mysteries of what has happened to the areas that you're kind of investigating. And because there's this whole pandemic with the virus, and it took over, became a big outbreak, it pretty much has ended humanity. But there's a lot of other sci-fi traits and inspirations within the story, so you're gonna deal with, and I was so bewildered by this. I was very surprised because I never dealt with a survival horror at all that had the concept of time traveling. I know that sounds like spoilers. I'm doing my best to not spoil it with you guys, but this is honestly the selling point personally for me. It was the time traveling. It wasn't just the whole sci-fi theme. It was the time traveling concept that was merged in with some philosophy themes that were similar to, and I know this sounds crazy, to Nier Automata, because the way that your characters talk in this game, the Traveler, and then you're gonna meet other characters that is or another character that is similar with you, his name is the Warden. They talk like as if they aren't human. I'm not sure whether or not they are human or not, because in the beginning of the game it really seems like the Traveler is being brainwashed, as if, you know, she's just here to serve a mission and nothing less. That's it, just to serve the mission and then call it a day. And the way that she just talks to herself, the way that she talks to other people, it sounds very robotic. And later down the line in the story, you kind of learn about people's past, right? Because you find all these documents, you find all these letters. It has the world building, just like any survival horror, where you have audio logs set around, or documents, or letters, or notes that you read. And in survival horrors, personally for me, that is the strongest thing that you could provide me for its lore and its world building, because I love to learn, not just visually, just seeing how the place got messed up and it has some little unique story to it by just visually looking at it, but I also like knowing the details from documents, notes, calls, whatever. The depth it has for its characters and for like random humans is very similar and interesting, just like Nier Automata. I'm very interested overall on where this is taking me and the mysteries on what to uncover and what happened to everybody that caused this whole pandemic or this apocalypse that supposedly ended humanity. Again, there's like a lot of Nier Automata scenes later down the line, and I was like, wow, I can't believe in the year 2025, like it really felt like Bloober Team was inspired, or like they played Nier and they thought that this was the best game they ever played, but they're like, damn, we're just known to create horror games and we have to implement Nier somehow into this new survival horror game that we're creating, so let's just do it. And they found some sort of way. Of course, there's some Dead Space inspiration with, again, the whole suit itself. It kind of screams Dead Space. And then you have this whole, when you're in like your safe room, you have a whole workstation just like Dead Space where you do your upgrades to your suit, your weapons, your other tools, equipment, all that sort of stuff. And I know this sounds like a generic ripoff from Nier Automata when it comes to its story, and then Dead Space on its surface level. But like I said, there's other inspirations from other games, to the point where the game itself really become its own identity, because there's not a lot of survival horror games like this. And I want to talk about the whole time travel concept that they implemented somehow. I don't know how you would think of this in a survival horror, but they're like, yeah, since this is a sci-fi survival horror, let's put in time travel. And and that's actually a whole gameplay mechanic, and it's also part of the story. I'm not going to talk about why there's time travel in the game, but when you do time travel, you do time travel in the same area, but before the whole apocalypse happened. So you get to see the same entire map in a cleaner version of it. It's not abandoned, it's not messed up. You could somewhat see how things were a bit normal before the whole infection began. I just thought that was really cool to see in terms of, you know, the plot and where the narrative was heading to, so that you could actually relive and see what people went through before the infection really started to mess things up. So that's all I gotta say about, you know, the time travel when it comes to its story. You guys end up finding that on your own, because yeah, it gets pretty interesting from there. I'm still understanding like what are the little traits and elements, you know, when it comes to Cronos. The gameplay though, when it comes to the time travel mechanic, so you have this emitter that you attach to your suit, and you see these time oddities which look like little black holes within your environment, and they're able to either fast forward or rewind time, or you're able to switch it back to the present time. They were able to implement your whole level, your areas, your map. You do a lot of funky stuff in this game where you could completely change the map. You start moving a lot of stuff that is out of your way. You start modifying your path to get to your next location by simply using the emitter as you affect all these time oddities around your areas, around these zones. And they start also making it very unique, because you have these boots that make you go on walls. It becomes very Super Mario Galaxy like, where you're on walls and you're traveling and platforming from one area to another while using the time oddities. It's so trippy, but it's interesting at the same time of how I wouldn't say they're like puzzles, because they're very linear, but it's entertaining to just use that traversal mechanic around the map. And I wish they've done more of it to make it much more interesting, and you could actually solve a lot more things using those mechanics, because there's a lot of moments you're also upside down. I found myself upside down shooting monsters, and I was like, wow, this is truly something. And it's not as confusing as what I'm describing it to be, because again, they made it linear where it feels convenient enough for you to understand on what is going on. What makes me really interested, and this is very similar to BioShock Infinite. In BioShock Infinite, when you're fighting a boss or you're fighting certain enemies, Booker DeWitt and Elizabeth has the powers, because again, BioShock Infinite is about time travel. She's able to rift and open up portals to summon items where Booker DeWitt is able to benefit from that, whether it's getting ammo, whether it's setting traps, whether, you know, for whatever reason, right? It's just a handy tool that Elizabeth is utilizing for Booker DeWitt. And the same concept is sort of applied to here. Around boss fights, or even when you're fighting tough mobs, you end up using the time oddity as a whole tool, where you could resummon like a red barrel to blow up. And there's a cooldown to it, because right after you shoot it, you can't summon it immediately, but after like maybe 30 seconds, maybe 25 seconds, it comes back, right? It comes back, and then you're able to rewind the time and resummon that barrel once more. It just really adds more mechanics to the gameplay, and as a video game, it really made it much more engaging, as it was just such a useful thing to experience overall. That's what I have to say when it comes to story and the concept of time traveling in a survival horror. You would never expect a gameplay mechanic like that, or even with a whole story concept, to do that in a survival horror, but it's there and it exists, and I love it a lot. Gameplay. How we feel about the gameplay? And I already talked about the world building and its documents, and how you're able to read and understand what's going on around the world when it comes to its story. So in terms of its world building, I love that a lot. Level design, it is amazing as well. It's what you would expect in a survival horror, because there's some backtracking happening. There's the use of certain routes, or the way that you navigate through these zones, these areas. There's some strategic approach to each and every one of them. Again, it's what you would typically expect, but it's definitely up there. It's enjoyable. A lot of it has been fun personally for me to go through. Really, the strongest trait about this game, again, is the gameplay and how they done their level design, because again, the implementation with the gravity boots, the time travel mechanic, and then you have the gunplay. The gunplay is so fun because you're able to get different weapons, because the weapons that I found a pistol, a shotgun, and then I found another pistol that is able to shoot automatically, and then I found like an AR, and they all have different firing modes, so that actually changes up your entire playthrough, or the way that you play the game. Your playstyle is completely different. It is just much more convenient for you to do charge shots, because they do much more powerful damage, and you could take out these enemies really quickly as soon as you utilize these resources correctly, because they are very strict with the ammo that they provide for you. But as soon as you actually hit your shots, and especially if they're headshots, the charge shots are the most viable thing to do in the game compared to you using the weapons normally. Because when you're not actually using charge shots, you're kind of being punished. I think that's an issue personally for me, because you don't have like really a different approach to the game. You're just kind of stuck doing one thing, and that's when the combat gets a little bit stale, when you're always relying on charged combat. They try to do something different, you know, when I found that automatic pistol, and you're able to take out the enemies much more quickly. But the problem is that you're so limited on your resources. They do not give ammo in this game. Sometimes you would have to craft them, and you waste even much more resources. Sometimes the enemies have a lot of health, and you end up not having a lot of ammo at all, so you have to be kind of creative. You got to use your environment so that you could do much more damage with the 2 bullets that you have. Like, for example, there's so many moments where I have to go around the map, look around if there's ammo or if there's a barrel that I could use, so that I'm able to stop like this big enemy, or sometimes there's multiple mobs trying to get me. So you really have to utilize a lot of your environment and the tools, because again, big emphasis on limited resources. So that might be something that you guys may like. This game kind of leans more towards the hardcore fan base when it comes to people who have played the survival horror genre, and if you're a newcomer to this whole entire series or genre, you may struggle in it. That's really it, because I found myself kind of complaining time to time because the game finds some sort of way for you to just waste so much ammo. Just like any other, just like Resident Evil, just like The Evil Within, games like that. And it kind of rubbed me off the wrong way, because there are clearly moments in the game where they just lock you in a room or like an area. You can't do any sort of progress, you can't run away, you have to fight for your life. So there's clearly segments in the game where you're just stuck in a room with a boss, you're just stuck in a room with crazy enemies, and they don't provide any more ammo. They don't provide some sort of way to, you know, give you even bits of resources, whether you need it for heals or if you need to craft like other tools like your torch fuel, which I will talk about later. It's like it's something that you could throw down and set things on fire, or your pyre mine. That's why you have to play pretty much perfectly when it comes to fighting the bosses, fighting the a lot of the mobs. So far, when I completed the boss fights, I have personally enjoyed them because they play pretty much like Resident Evil. You're just stuck in a big room with them, and you're just constantly going around shooting explosives, you're finding resources, and it's that standard boss fight that you would expect. But they're always fun, they're engaging. I never seem to run out of ammo, just because I was just being cautious as well. Typically when I'm fighting mobs, that's when the ammo runs out, and they don't provide any more, whether you're stuck in that room or not. And when that ever happens to you, you're kind of forced to use your melee combat. I forgot to mention this, since this is somewhat important. Every time you do kill an infected, there is a chance that you get loot from it. You get some sort of resource or currency, which is great. But at most scenarios that I have been given, they do not give resources when I needed the most. And I wish that was honestly a thing, especially when they're really pushing the difficulty and the amount of mobs at you. Just drop the ammo. The melee combat is only useful to provide spacing between you and the enemy, because some enemies just kind of run up to your face. So if you just kind of shove them away by pressing R1, or I don't know what the controls are on PC, but when you press R1, shove them away, you actually have room where you could just run back, get that headshot, and then go on to the next enemy, which I do like. So punching does matter when you press R1, but the stomping, I feel like the stomping is not as useful. The purpose of the stomp in Dead Space was to destroy, the bodies so that the necromorphs wouldn't be able to morph with the other dead bodies anymore. Here in Cronos, when you do that, because I still stomp on the dead bodies regardless, but the problem is about this is that, yeah, there's really no point because they're going to still morph with them anyway. So I feel like that's kind of a flaw on their end, where one of the mechanics is a bit useless. And that's when the torch fuel actually comes into play, because when you have a torch fuel, you press L1 to throw down fire on the ground, which is your torch fuel, and you do that to burn the bodies so that they won't be able to morph. And you could do that to multiple bodies, or you could even do it to the live infected if they are trying to to morph, or they're just even trying to attack you. You could use it as a stun. So I like the approaches to that, but like I said, there's really no other way to destroy the dead bodies, or there's no way to use the stomp in any sort of important way. Yeah, the melee could have been some sort of improvement. I wish they honestly embrace much more of their combat by just adding much more resources, or having the melee combat being much more useful than how it is right now. What I do like with the enemies, like I said, the enemies, yes, they do morph just like the Dead Space monsters that you would see. So what I like about the enemy design in Cronos compared to Dead Space, because in Dead Space I feel like they are reasonable when they do morph. So when you end up fighting a morphed monster in Dead Space, you're still able to take him out. I'm referring to Dead Space 1, by the way. But here in Cronos, you never want them to morph, because they become a big threat. 100% a big threat to it. And once they morph and they evolve, they have this whole new design, which I think that's pretty cool. It may be that they can morph twice, or they can morph only once, but regardless, I like how their whole design, like its character design, it looks great, but at the same time, they are very annoying to deal with, and it gives punishment towards the player for making it happen. What I also like about its design, it clearly shows that it's about to morph, with a dead body on the ground. And you know that because it has a lot of tentacles wrapped around its body, and it's going towards the dead body. It's like a little alert. It's about to morph, but it's also vulnerable at the same time, because it's so concentrated and focused on trying to morph. So this gives you like a clear headshot for you to interrupt that mutation or that morphing, and also for you to take it out immediately. So I like that certain aspect to it, but there are a lot of moments where I just can't handle everything all at once. So yes, things get very complicated, and that's when the torch fuel gets very, very useful in the game. But like I said, with how limited your resources are, I just wish that they embrace the combat much more. I wish they do give you more resources when you're in forced fights in rooms or areas, because you can't even progress at all. And what I love about modern Resident Evil games is that, or like RE2 Remake, for example, you don't have to fight every fight. You only fight boss fights in that game. Everything else, you just keep going, you keep solving. And if you're gonna make a game that relies on limited resources, that should be an option, to always run, then fight. So I wish they had that. So there's sort of an identity crisis when it comes to this game. But at the same time, as soon as you do learn how the game operates, it is fun. They don't even provide a difficulty in the beginning of the game. So you are, I think, playing on normal, because I read on the trophies and achievements that you could also finish the game on hard mode. So I assume that you unlock hard mode once you complete the game. So I'm very curious how crazy that is, because I mean, normal itself is, it could be difficult. I'm not also sure if they have a difficulty adjuster just like the Resident Evil series. So, and you know, when it comes to having a difficulty adjuster, I'm not a big fan of it, especially when it comes to survival horror, because all they really do is make excuses for you to take a lot of damage, or use up a lot of ammo, or they just buff up enemies' health. I'm just not a fan of that, especially when you're playing the game right. But other than that, would I say Bloober Team cooked? Because, you know, a lot of people have been questioning their previous releases, their titles, their projects before the Silent Hill 2 remake. And unfortunately, Bloober Team cooked with this one. Because, like I said, the gameplay, it's honestly, there's no other survival horror that's an original IP that's new, that has a whole new concept with its storytelling as well about time travel. It's honestly, it's great. It's honestly one of the, hear me out, it may be a great sleeper hit to play if you get it on sale, but currently it's on $60 USD, and honestly, if I were to get this for $60, I wouldn't mind, because also the length of the game. I already invested over 10 hours already, or almost 10 hours. I only completed 45% of the game. There's a lot of other side things to do. You could explore much more in the game, because you could go through all these different areas. And I noticed that I'm always taking my sweet time and checking out all these different routes or these secret places. As a survival horror, I'm really enjoying the exploration aspect, even though it's linear. And I think it's because also how the sound design is. You just hear the ambient noises, you just hear the quietness of these towns, these cities, or wherever you're navigating at. And then the gunplay, the sound effects of the gunplay, of you reloading your gun, with you preparing your items. It's just true ASMR at the same time. That's what I loved about the Silent Hill 2 remake as well. The game, personally for me, isn't as scary compared to the Silent Hill 2 remake, because if you're coming into this as someone that's expecting some horror, and you're already used to, you know, playing these sort of games, don't expect to honestly be scared of the game, but expect some sort of challenge, or some enjoyment with the gameplay. This game is very gameplay focused, which I'm really liking a lot. So there's no shame to that at all. I think the game is very eerie, or it has that creepiness to it. And of course it has its own jump scares, right, that got me. And I was personally freaked out in the Silent Hill 2 remake the entire playthrough, compared to Cronos, where it's kind of expected on where I'm gonna get scared at, or what's gonna get me. But again, it's a survival horror still, and there's still some creepiness and eerie factor to a lot of it. Yeah, because there's some that I got low-key chills from that, because it was like, well, what are we going through right now? It's a little bit suspicious here, or what are these voices are talking to me? What is this? I don't like this. So there's a lot of stuff of that throughout the game, just sprinkled throughout the game. I think the only problem as well that I personally have, again, it's pretty much the resource management and how they handle your inventory. Since there's a lot of exploration, funny enough, or maybe it takes a lot of time just to go to one place to another. I wouldn't say like big exploration, but there'll be times where you're kind of backtracking because, oh, you're like, oh snap, there's a locked door and I didn't bring this key item with me. It's stuck in my storage. I need to get it from my safe room. So let me go back, and you kind of spend like 4 or 5 minutes just going back there to get your key item, and then open up the door, collect the items, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, my inventory is still full. Let me put back my key item in the storage. So there's a lot of back and forth happening, and there's a lot of filler time in the game, and I think that was somewhat a criticism from the Silent Hill 2 remake. Some people said that it was a bit unnecessary to kind of stretch out the game. It didn't really need to have like newer content to experience for the Silent Hill 2 remake, because an average playthrough is already 20 hours in the Silent Hill 2 remake. And from what I've read from Cronos, from what people have reported, it takes up about like 15 to 20 hours to complete the whole entire game, whether or not you are doing the little extra stuff. So yeah, there's gonna be some little venturing on to these different routes or pathways that will take up some of your time. And I also do wish that they add a map. If they're gonna make us do all this, give us a map. I would really appreciate it. There is no map in the game. You kind of just rely on and memorize a lot of the pathways that you initially go through. So I wish a map was honestly there. They give you like a compass and they literally tell you where to go. If you press right stick, they literally tell you where to go to these certain areas. They mark it literally on your compass and also in the game. They literally tell you where to go. So why not have a map? But overall, I think Bloober Team cooked. This was honestly a survival horror that I personally wanted for a long time because, again, it's hard to make a game that's scary and also very gameplay focused, but I do think it has a right balance of both. Maybe it could have been, they could have increased much more horror into it, and they could have balanced the game a bit more when it came to resources or when it came to combat, because if you're gonna make us fight much more, then yes, provide us more resources. If you don't want us to make us fight, if you want fighting to be more so a punishment, or if you just want to simply make it a tool, give us the option in these levels just to proceed on. The identity crisis with the combat is a bit confusing on what they initially really wanted to do for the game, but as soon as you get used to it, there is, and find that sweet spot, very satisfying to actually personally play. And I actually like the challenge of how they are strict with your resources when you're combating a lot of enemies and bosses. I like the connections between each systems of what they have created. So, you know, your map knowledge is important, your resource management is important, the way that you use your weapons is very important, because if you don't do charge shots, you're just wasting a lot of your ammo. And again, that's a debatable thing, because honestly, they gave a whole separate upgrade, or not really an upgrade, but like they gave a whole separate pistol that could automatically fire but doesn't have like a charge shot, but they sort of balance it out in a way where you're able to where it does much more damage than your actual pistol itself. But the problem is the gun is so useless because of how the resources are, how they're so scarce. Like there's not a lot of ammo in the game. I just honestly put that in my storage, especially when I have a ready upgrade pistol. If they ever make like an expansion or like a DLC, or if they ever make another survival horror, I hope they do improve upon that, where the combat makes much more sense. This game has so much potential. It's so fun. This is a game, it has that sweet spot personally for me where, yeah, it has a bit of the horror factor, but it also has a lot of strategic value on how you approach these levels. And that's what I really initially wanted for RE8 and RE4. I didn't want RE4 to really be like, I was hoping for the RE4 remake to be a much more survival horror than an action game, to say the least, to be honest with you. Yes, they did limit you with ammo, but again, I feel like that's ridiculous considering of the amount of combat scenarios that they put you in RE4, the RE4 remake. And then with RE8 Village, as much as I did like how the gameplay was structured, I wish that they put up more of the horror. So here, this is the sweet spot. Like, this is the best that we could get in 2025. Again, it's $60. The length of the game and the content is there. The story may be confusing later on, or potentially it could be more complex. Again, I have not fully completed the game, so I don't know everything about the story. But if this is technically a game that is inspired, hypothetically speaking, if it is inspired by Nier Automata, when it comes to these sort of games, it may take some time to kind of sink in and understand. You just have to let it marinate, when it comes down to these type of games. But overall, I think I would give it, like, I don't want to give it necessarily a 9, but it's probably, it goes around the late 80s, like maybe like a 85, maybe 87 out of 100 if I were to rate it. So like, yeah, like an 8.7 out of 10 or whatever. So I just never expected a game like this. Hopefully, you know, by the next stream I ever do about it, we finish up the game entirely, because I'm just so intrigued with the story at this point. I hope in the future that Bloober Team really does create much more original IPs when it comes to survival horrors, because now there's honestly a future. It seems like they have confidence, because from what I've read and what I heard, that Bloober Team was not the best on creating their horror games and how they set up and structured their horror games. They were mechanically objectively speaking, they were mechanically bad, apparently, according to people who have consumed, you know, their games. But I think ever since the Silent Hill 2 remake, they regained that confidence. They had that kick into them, where now, like, they're kind of, they could honestly compete with the Resident Evil series. After playing Cronos, they could honestly compete with Resident Evil, because there are moments I felt like I was playing RE4 without like the crazy combat, and there are moments where I felt like I was playing Dead Space. There were moments too where I was truly playing like a hardcore survival horror experience. So if you guys have played this game, feel free to share in the comments section down below. Remember to hype up the video. That's like a whole new feature on YouTube, so hype up the video so you guys could put this video much more in the algorithm. Especially remember, drop a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Thank you for, you know, watching this whole thing. This is actually a long review. I didn't expect the review to be long, but there was actually a lot to talk about, and I didn't even finish the game yet. So hopefully we can finish the game soon before other game releases come out, because there's so much to go into now. There's so many other games releasing. But thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I'm out, and let me know how you guys feel about Cronos, because I can't be the only one, right? Like, is it actually impressive, or is it just me being a casual? Alright, y'all. Peace.